Well, we promise you some more perspective to this, and guess who's here? Philip Namfuri, who has been away for some time. Good to see you on this
Daryl,
program.
thank you.
Philip, so the conversation about debts, I see familiar words, for instance, expenditure cuts, still struggling to meet revenue targets. That's the story, even after we have left the IMF support program.
Okay, so let me start off from here. Developing countries such as ours and frontier economies such as ours, we face a very difficult task. We are trying to accelerate growth, but at the same time, in the acceleration of this growth, we must not burden future generations to come. You are very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and developing sustainably involves doing this without burdening future generations. But how can we do this? We collect revenue and we spend. But we have a pattern where we've been collecting less revenue and we've been spending more, leading to budget deficits over the course of every financial year, as far as I am concerned in terms of my age. Now, the debt levels have been increasing, but what the IMF is advocating for is taking on this debt, but doing so in a smart way so as not to burden us even now and burden us in the future. And there are a lot of ways we can do this. We've had several discussions on Business Live and all our shows, and generally as a country, on how we can increase our revenue and reduce our expenditure. And sometimes it seems very easy when we discuss it, but when you're putting it into practice, government has so many competing needs, so many needs both from the recurrent expenditure side and the capital expenditure side, and must meet these needs, must also think of elections, let's be realistic here, and must also ensure that we get what we need in the coming years or the coming financial years. So yes, there was a debate in this IMF World Bank meetings, and it was hashtag debt for development. And at the core of this discussion came up the transparency of debt. Now, Bank of Ghana will normally publish figures on our debt. Ministry of Finance will also publish theirs, etc. Everybody will come together and put data together. More often than not, we have Bank of Ghana coming out with the figures. But in this discussion should be the issue of transparency. When we take the debt, let us use it for what it's required for. Let us track its use. You know, we always are familiar with taking the Eurobonds. They state the use of these Eurobonds, what the proceeds will be used for. But we don't normally follow through and see, have indeed these debts been used for what they have stated for? And some of these things feed into the transparency issue. Because if we know what these debts are used for, if it's going to wasteful expenditures, if it's going to corruption, whatsoever, then we can track it and we can bring some accountability into the circle. But when you don't do that, then we go for large debts. Then it increases our servicing costs. So we take revenue and we're pumping a lot of it into wages and compensation. Then the rest goes into refinancing of our debt or paying the interest on our debt.
Right.
And the cycle goes on and on. So these are some of the things that we need to be cognizant of in these discussions we have.
So we had the Assistant Director at the Fiscal Department of the IMF, Catherine Patillo, talk about the fact that these expenditure cuts must target non-essential expenditure. So, for example, what is she talking about, and how feasible is this in ensuring that we don't hit the roof when it comes to debts?
But non-essential expenditure, I beg your pardon, will be better answered by those in power. If you look at our main expenditure items, wages and compensation, interest payments, statutory payments, capital expenditure, the first three I mentioned are very essential. These three are also recurrent, in the sense that when we pay, it's not going to finance any infrastructure projects. They are going to be used. So, and we have very little left for capital expenditure, which we go and borrow from. So, cutting non-essential expenditure, we'll have to go into the various MDAs, the various allocations, and see what is not needed there. And this will be best answered and done by those in power, because they know, they have access to the data, they have access to information. We can only juxtapose and give our own projections, but they actually know what is wasteful, what is not. Different debates come up as to number of people in government and all these things. So
we've got to move on from this, but I'll just ask you this quickly. I mean, we know this, we know what we have to do, and seeing that we are entering an election year, I mean, sometimes I just feel this is just talk to make us happy, and that we are not going to see real action taken.
Well, the election year cycle, like I mentioned in my first submission, is part of their priority spending. you must do certain things that you stated in your budget, and 2020 budget will spell it out. However, when you're doing that, don't confuse it with your election-related promises. Make sure that what you budgeted for is what you follow. Do it properly, and all things being equal. But sometimes there are political pressures which we must factor into these discussions. So we must just make sure that what we put in place, this Fiscal Responsibility Act we put in place, we must follow through with it and ensure that we stick to what the numbers are.
Thank you very much indeed. Philip Namfori will be coming to you again at 9 p.m. with the PM Express Business Edition. He'll be talking about the communication services tax. You want to stay tuned in for that at 9 p.m. later in the day.